They threw me out. Now they want a piece of my success.
I'm 27, and a year ago, I started my own business with a couple of friends from college. We're doing great financially now, and we've already become profitable. A few days ago, my parents, both 54 years old, whom I hadn't spoken to since I graduated college, suddenly reached out and offered to become partners in my business, saying they wanted to invest in it. I said no. I didn't even bring it up with my friends because everyone knew I had a bad relationship with my parents, and so did they. Under those circumstances, I didn't want to involve them in our business. My parents had always neglected me and were emotionally abusive throughout my childhood, which was, to say the least, strange, considering I was the kind of kid most parents would normally be proud of. They're quite wealthy, too. My father is a dentist and surgeon, and my mother is a CFO. I grew up in a family of high achievers, and naturally, I was very ambitious from a young age. But for some reason, my parents never supported me and constantly mocked me for being a nerd. They had plenty of money, yet they barely provided for even my basic needs. I had no idea why they seemed to hate me so much until I realized they were, in a way, blaming me for not achieving the kind of success they had once dreamed of. They were successful, sure, but they never became famous. I found all of this out when I was 16, after confiding in my aunt, my dad's younger sister, who's 46 now, and the only person who truly understood me. She was the one who told me the truth about my parents' irrational hatred. She felt I was old enough to know. My parents blamed me for having to spend time and money raising a child, and believed that if they had invested those resources into their careers instead, they could have achieved much more. They had me under pressure from their families. They never actually wanted kids. And since I was here, they had to deal with me somehow, and what they chose was constant mockery and humiliation throughout my childhood. I was deprived of a lot. Even though they technically paid for everything, there was no real support, not with little things like homework or school projects, and certainly not with bigger issues, like conflicts at school. Whenever I asked for something that wasn't an absolute necessity, they would just brush me off, or worse, mock me. They made fun of my appearance, which was easy for them because I was skinny and looked like a stereotypical nerd. They laughed at my interest in computers and told me the best I could ever become was just some IT guy, that being in tech was my ceiling, and investing anything in me would be a waste of money. Whenever I asked for something that wasn't absolutely essential, they would either dismiss me or, even worse, ridicule me. They mocked my appearance, which wasn't hard since I was skinny and looked like a typical nerd. They made fun of my passion for computers and said that, at best, I'd end up as just an IT guy. That was my ceiling, according to them, so spending money on me was, in their eyes, a waste. I was emotionally ignored. I'd grown up with that kind of treatment, so the insults felt normal. Back then, I didn't see anything wrong with it. I thought the problem was with me, that maybe I just wasn't someone who deserved the kind of love parents are supposed to give. It sucked, but to me, it was just how things were. In my teenage years, I started to push back a little against their harsh treatment, but my father quickly shut that down. He threatened to kick me out if I didn't fall in line. So instead of openly rebelling, I started confiding in my aunt, the one person who truly understood me. She once asked me if I wanted her to report our family situation to Child Protective Services, but I always said no. I was too afraid of the consequences. My aunt couldn't adopt me, and I didn't want to be a burden, so I chose to endure the suffering at my parents' house. Whenever things got really bad, I'd talk to my aunt, and that helped me get through it. When I finally learned the reason behind my parents' behavior, I made a decision: I would disappear from their lives. Right after I graduated college, and since they didn't care about me anyway, they let me go without a word. I went to a public school, and forgive me if this sounds arrogant, but I honestly believe it was a waste of my potential. Either way, it was a clear sign that they didn't care about my education or about me in general. Still, I held on to some expectations, some hope that things might change, but that completely fell apart when they told me that once I finished high school and turned 18, there would no longer be a place for me in their home, not until I achieved something on my own. On top of that, they refused to pay for my education. That was the breaking point for me. I snapped and told them they couldn't do this to me, that I knew I had a bright future ahead. I'd been a strata student my whole life, and if they threw me out right before college, they'd be putting all of that at risk. But they didn't budge. They looked me in the eye and said, "You have no future." Then they added that I shouldn't get my hopes up about some bright future that my teachers and friends had only made. The mistake of convincing me I was some kind of genius. Honestly, that was complete nonsense. Even those so-called low-level IT guys have deep knowledge and deserve respect, but my ignorant, awful parents would never understand that. I tried to convince them to at least help pay for my education. We could figure out housing later, but they refused to budge. So, a few weeks before my 18th birthday, I ran away from home and went to stay with my aunt. That was complete bullshit. Even those so-called worthless IT guys have deep expertise and deserve respect, but my stupid, disgusting parents would never understand that. I tried to reason with them, asked if they could at least cover my tuition. We could figure out the housing situation later, but they were absolutely firm in their refusal. So, a few weeks before my 18th birthday, I ran away and went to live with my aunt. I applied for scholarships at a bunch of colleges, while my aunt kept trying to convince my parents to help, but it was no use. In the end, we decided I'd go to the school that offered the biggest tuition discount. Thankfully, I got accepted to a college with a scholarship that covered 80% of the tuition, and it had a solid computer science program. That worked for me, and my aunt offered to pay the remaining amount. She worked in sales and didn't make nearly as much as my parents, but she still agreed to help. Plus, with the scholarship, the overall cost was relatively manageable. I lived in a dorm and visited my aunt whenever she was home, though she was often away on business trips. That's how I spent my college years. My life improved drastically after I left my parents' house. The constant anxiety and stress faded. I became happier and found it easier to make friends. That's actually how I met my current friends and business partners, the same ones I eventually co-founded an IT company with. Things are going pretty well for us now. I honestly thought my parents wouldn't care what I was doing, just like they hadn't cared back in high school. When they found out I was graduating as valedictorian, they decided to show up at the ceremony. Naturally, they couldn't get in. I hadn't bought them tickets or invited them since we hadn't spoken in years. We ended up running into each other afterward, and I was shocked to see them standing next to my aunt, who looked just as annoyed as I felt. I had plans to go out for drinks with my friends, but instead, I spent the next 2 hours in my parents' hotel room, arguing and fighting. They were furious that I hadn't invited them to the graduation while I had invited my aunt, and they demanded an explanation. It was honestly absurd, considering they'd thrown me out at 18 and refused to pay for my education, even though they easily had the means. Not to mention all the emotional abuse I'd endured growing up. It wasn't just about my childhood, it was about the emotional damage that still affects me as an adult. I didn't believe they deserved any kind of explanation, but I also didn't want them making a scene in front of everyone. So I walked them back to their hotel. Once we were there, I finally snapped. I told them exactly what I thought of them, everything I'd kept bottled up for years. I made it clear that I never wanted to see them again. And if they ever tried to contact me in the future, I'd take legal action, a restraining order, or whatever it took. Then I left the hotel and went to meet up with my friends. I wasn't about to let my parents ruin what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. We haven't spoken since. Later, my aunt told me that my parents were angry and disappointed. They even talked about cutting me out of their will. But that didn't change anything. I had never expected to get anything from them anyway. And that was the end of it. It's been almost 7 years since then, and we haven't spoken once. But a couple of days ago, they suddenly called. Dea asked my aunt for my number, telling her they wanted to apologize. She gave it to them. She meant to warn me but forgot, and that's okay. She's been busy lately, and I don't blame her. But there was no apology, not a word. They went straight into a business pitch because, now, investing in me finally seemed worth it. So I said no. I hung up and blocked their number. After that, I told my friends what had happened. They didn't mind that I had turned my parents down without consulting them. They knew the whole history and completely understood. I didn't know what to expect next. But the very next day, my parents struck back. They tagged me and all my friends in a snide Facebook post, claiming I wasn't the self-made computer genius I thought I was, but just some guy who had achieved moderate success. They claimed that my success in business was only possible because of my father's money, and that now I was refusing to acknowledge all the help they supposedly gave me over the years. I was in complete shock when I saw the post. I almost called them just to tell them off directly. But before I did that, I decided to respond with something I had kept for years. I still had a few old videos from my teenage years, clips I had recorded while living with them, documenting daily life in case I ever needed proof in court of how awful they truly were as parents. I had never posted them before because I genuinely wanted nothing to do with them, and I knew that if I ever released those videos, showing them mocking me, being cruel, treating me like garbage, there would be consequences. Back then, I just didn't want any more drama, so I kept quiet. But their Facebook post changed everything. That was the moment I finally hit publish. And here's where I might have acted like a jerk, or at least, that's how some people might see it. I wrote a long post on Instagram explaining the entire history of my relationship with my parents. And I included the videos exposing them for who they really were. Right after that, I called my lawyer to explain the situation. But she had already gotten ahead of me. She'd started preparing a defamation lawsuit against my parents for their actions. And she also planned to reach out to my business partners to keep them fully informed. I didn't know yet whether my business partners would be on board with the lawsuit, especially since their names were mentioned in that Facebook post too. Meanwhile, under my parents' post, several of their friends and extended family members had already left comments saying things like, "It's great he's finally been exposed, and will never support his business again." So yeah, the grounds for a defamation case were definitely there. I sent my lawyers screenshots of everything and made sure to tell my partners about the situation so they were fully in the loop. Once everything was set in motion, I expected my parents might call to apologize, but instead, they called demanding an apology from me. They said I had crossed the line by posting those videos. Their argument that they made their accusations on private Facebook accounts, meaning only a limited number of people saw them, while I published everything on a public Instagram profile, where it would reach far more people given my follower count. They insisted I take the post down immediately. They demanded I take down the entire post because people had already started messaging them with insults and even threats. They said this could ruin their careers, especially since the videos made them look absolutely terrible. If their employers saw it, they said it would be the end for them. I lost my temper a bit and told them they were getting exactly what they deserved, then hung up. Still, I ended up archiving the post and turned off my phone for a while, just to clear my head. When I finally checked my phone a few hours later, I saw an email from them. In the email, they apologized for everything that had happened in the past, but they made sure to emphasize how cruel my revenge had been. They also pointed out that I had posted personal videos of them without their consent, which, according to them, gave them legal grounds to sue me. It was clear they'd already been served with the defamation lawsuit. They told me I should drop it and warned that if I didn't, they wouldn't hesitate to go public with accusations about my unethical behavior, which they said could seriously damage my business. I discussed everything with my partners, and they were fully supportive. They agreed we had nothing to be ashamed of. I did what I did to defend myself, while my parents had deliberately lied and twisted the truth to make me look like a fraud. If anything, we were being reasonable, and they were not. And yet, I still feel guilty. They did apologize, at least in writing. And I know that going through with this lawsuit will drag everyone through the mud. No one will come out of it clean. Anyway, I don't know what to do next. Tell me, am I wrong for suing my parents for defamation, even after they apologized? Hey everyone, so I've decided to move forward with the lawsuit for a few reasons. First of all, this wasn't just my decision. It was made together with my friends and business partners. And even though their post didn't go as viral as mine, I'm certain plenty of people still saw it, and that could seriously damage our business. On top of that, it was clear that my parents' goal was to damage my reputation, and the reputation of my company, just to satisfy their egos by tearing down what I've built. So, the defamation claim is absolutely justified. Secondly, their apology means absolutely nothing to me. It only came after their own careers were threatened. It wasn't sincere, it was purely... My whole life, I never stood up to my parents because I was afraid of them. Even now, at almost 30 years old, I'm still scared to go against them. That fear is like a part of me so deeply rooted that I didn't even realize it was there until some of you pointed out in the comments how many chances I had to tell people the truth, and how many times I stayed silent out of fear of the consequences. But now, I finally understand they can't hurt me anymore. Right now, the power is in my hands, and they can't hurt me anymore. I'm going to move forward with the lawsuit, no matter how fake their apology was. We'll see how it ends, but one thing I know for sure, I'll make them pay. I'm done being the good guy, especially to people who never deserved it. My parents treated me with outright cruelty, and no child deserves a childhood like that. Now that I finally have a chance to hold them accountable, I'm taking it. Up until now, I tried to be the bigger person, but I don't see any reason to keep doing that anymore. When they keep coming after me over and over again, just to draw attention to themselves, it's disgusting, and I'm done putting up with it. Today, my aunt reached out to ask what I'd decided about the situation with my parents. I told her that we're moving forward with the lawsuit. She supported my decision and said she was proud of me. She also apologized for not doing more for me when I was a kid, though honestly, I don't blame her for anything. Back then, she was just starting out in life and building her own career, so she simply couldn't afford to take full responsibility for me. But when it truly mattered, she stepped in. She helped me, and I'll always be grateful to her for that. My grandparents and the rest of the family practically idolized my parents. So no one would have believed me if I had told them the truth, what things were really like, and how my parents actually treated me. Even if my aunt had gone to Child Protective Services, I could have ended up in foster care or in an even worse situation. I'm not saying she was perfect, but I feel a strong need to defend her now, especially when so many people are quick to criticize. The one person who ever truly fought for me and supported me with everything she had, that's all for now. I haven't spoken to my parents since their last email, and chances are, they're still hoping I'll drop the lawsuit. It's been a while now, and we've decided to first try reaching a resolution through a court-appointed mediator. If it comes to it, we're ready to go to court, but for now, we're aiming for a non-litigious settlement. My parents have money and quite a lot of it, so I don't feel any guilt here. They're the ones who screwed up, and now they should be the ones to pay for it. I don't know what's happening with their jobs right now, but ever since I posted those videos, it's been full-blown panic on their end. They've accused me of putting their careers at risk. Honestly, it's hard to believe just how much manipulation and drama they packed into their calls and emails. Thankfully, I didn't fall for any of it, because that would have been a tragedy in itself. They really tried to twist the narrative and paint my actions as just as bad as theirs, or even worse. They spread false rumors about me. All I did was respond by telling the truth publicly. Honestly, I have a strong urge to unarchive the videos once the legal process is over, because my parents truly deserve to be exposed. The world should see who they really are. Today, the court officially assigned a mediator for our negotiations and notified all parties. My parents called me. I temporarily unblocked their number just to take the call. They wanted to know exactly when I planned to drop the lawsuit, claiming the situation was spiraling out of control. I told them plainly, that's not going to happen, and they completely lost it. They started yelling. I could barely make out what they were even trying to say. One thing was clear though, they were absolutely furious. There was a lot of incoherent ranting and emotional chaos. In the end, I just hung up, but they immediately called back. This time, my father said I had pushed him too far, and that my little tricks didn't scare him in the slightest. I pushed back and finally told them everything I'd been holding in. It was harsh, but it was absolutely necessary. After that conversation, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I didn't let them continue the argument. I just hung up mid-sentence and gave them no chance to fire back. But they didn't back down. Right after that, my parents called my aunt and started telling her their version of the story. They claimed I was suing them without any real basis, which couldn't be further from the truth, and tried to manipulate her emotions, hoping to get her sympathy and convince me to stop the process. But my aunt isn't that easy to manipulate. By now, my parents have played the "but we're family" card so many times that it's completely lost its power. So she told them exactly what I asked her to. She said she could offer them sympathy, but nothing more. And if they kept calling her, they'd lose even that. She told them that if they kept harassing her, she'd go to the police and report them for persistent harassment. That was honestly badass on her part. After that, I didn't hear anything from my parents for a few hours until later that evening, when I found out that since they couldn't get my aunt on their side, they started contacting practically every relative they could. They were telling everyone that I was suing them for no reason at all. Eventually, all the relatives started sending me the exact same message. It was a pretty poorly executed move. It became immediately obvious that my parents had written the message themselves. Instead of even trying to personalize it, most people just forwarded the same generic text, word for word. It was painfully clear my parents had orchestrated the whole thing, hoping to pressure me into backing down. Honestly, it was kind of sad how desperately they were trying to fix things now that they clearly realized it was already too late. The legal proceedings have officially started. We're currently on a break. I just had lunch and I'm writing this post while sitting in the hallway. My parents have been seething with venom the entire time, but it's obvious they're losing ground. If they want to avoid a full-blown trial, they'll have no choice but to accept our terms. When we stepped out for the lunch break, my father stared me down, while my mother tried to play the helpless, emotional victim, comforting him and acting like she was falling apart, but no one bought it. We all knew it was just a performance. My friends and business partners have been incredibly supportive. They've been with me through every step of this process, and I'm beyond grateful for that. Even today, one of my friends told me that if I ever need to talk after all this, he's always there because he truly understands how emotionally exhausting this is for me. Despite having terrible parents, I feel incredibly lucky to have such amazing friends and a loving aunt. I genuinely appreciate everything I have. That's the end of the story. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.